Thank you very much for joining us for this screening of Writing with Fire by Rintu Thomas and Sushmit Ghosh. Writing with Fire premieres and streams on Independent Lens on PBS Monday, March 28th at 10 Eastern and 9 Central. Check your local PBS stations for your broadcast time and date. My name is Mariano Avila. I'm a producer with Milwaukee PBS, and joining me for this panel discussion are Dr. Sumana Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor of Digital Media and Performing Arts at Marquette University. She is from India and did her thesis on print media in India. Also with us is Megan McGee, Executive Director of Milwaukee's very own storytelling platform, X-Fabula, whose focus is to connect our city through real stories. They currently have projects to bring marginalized voices to the forefront. So Megan, Sumana, welcome to our discussion. And thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
To dive right in, Sumana, you probably understand the context of what we just watched better than any of us. So can you tell us a little bit about the cultural relevance of a woman-led Delhi-centric news outlet in India?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about Dalits, think about all of the systemic issues associated with race in this country and Black people. Because I was just kind of going back to looking at some interviews from Dalit journalists, in the last few days. Because when I saw this film, that's the first thought I had, that think about that. When you think about the inequities and discrimination that you see here with Black communities, marginalized populations, indigenous communities, and apply that to the Dalit situation. So, and so when you look at the media, and we can have more conversations about that, but India has a lot of media outlets. So it's not like we don't have journalists, we don't have sources covering news, but a lot of these media outlets are owned by the upper class, people of higher caste, because caste system is the big inequity, variable in India. And so more so in certain parts of the country and more so with the Dalits. So there is one particular line that I heard in the film yesterday was about how this woman was saying that this is something that I'll probably, take to my grave, the way people treat me because I'm a Dalit woman. And I personally, I'm from the Brahmin caste, which is the uppermost caste in India. And all my life, I have been so ashamed of, how some of these castes have been treated in India, and more so in the smaller communities, and more so if you're Dalit, because it's not like you have these other backward castes, of which Dalits are one, and then we have the rest of it. So so I would say that the fact that they have a newspaper or a media source that is completely run by Dalits, and not only Dalits, but Dalit women, is a huge deal, because even though there are so many media outlets there, they're not owned by Dalits. And if you have a Dalit journalist, then oftentimes they are given very soft beats. Like I remember reading an interview about this woman who wanted to cover, this particular Dalit woman politician, which is rare. And this woman politician was talking about how she was not taken seriously, because Dalits were considered to be part of the untouchable caste. So literally people wouldn't, they're so like, there's such a discrimination and stigma with that. So, and this journalist wanted to do this story, but then her editor just told her, do a show, like a story on recipes, forget about this. So even if you have that, just the fact that you have these women running this, it's a huge deal, because it's like they have the control over what stories they can run, and they can offer this voice to this stigmatized community. Because I personally would love to say caste is dead in India. I would love to say it because it doesn't impact my life, but it impacts lives of people that are in the midst of it, and which this film just reminded me of. And it made me feel ashamed of this heritage, because, I feel the guilt all the time of being a Brahmin. And so, absolutely. So that's something I would like to start with, but I know Megan has a lot of things to say, and I can share more later, but those are just some of my thoughts right now.
No, and thank you for those thoughts, because again, this is something more, about than the rest of us. But Megan, the women, they're, told they're not journalists. They're belittled for doing the work that they do. X-Fabula takes people from all walks of life to tell true stories. So what would you say is the significance of community-led storytelling?
Yeah, it's interesting. We regularly will say to people, who here's a storyteller, and you'll have people who say that they're not. And then at the same time, I'll say, okay, well, who here has ever gone home from work and complained about something that happened? Or when you've met someone new, have you told them something funny that happened? Or, even testifying in court. All of these things involve telling stories, going to therapy. So it's interesting. Sometimes there are barriers to individuals telling their story that are not the things we think of. Maybe we think of stage fright. Some people literally don't think that they have anything worthwhile to say. They may not always say that up front, but you might have people say, "Oh, I don't know. I don't have a story. I don't think people would be interested in hearing me." But the reality is, if we want to truly live in like a democratic society, we really need to continually be building understanding of each other and how we're different and how we're the same and what our needs are. And so when you get people telling their personal stories, they advocate for themselves. And there's a lot of richness and a lot of healing that can come when that happens. So it's really great to see such a powerful example of this because honestly, I would think for caste oppressed people, there's many, many barriers to them telling their story. But how powerful it is when a group of people comes together. Sometimes that's what we need to do to make it a situation where we can be brave together.
And speaking of some of those barriers, you teach digital media, but also studied print. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is about digital that is allowing community-led initiatives like these to sprout, to grow, to thrive under, in under-resourced communities and under so much pressure from, social stigma?
Yeah, so first of all, I studied print when I was doing my MPhil thesis. That was years back. So now I study more digital. But yes, absolutely. I understand in terms of, and it's so interesting to me because I am also teaching a class on media and politics this year. And we talked about press freedom and we talked about, social media and also marginalized communities. And so there are different things here involved, like first of all, also local media. Because think about how many people are reading this newspaper or following this YouTube channel online. And I was thinking that's a very different story from how it is here. Because I just did a lecture last week about how local media is floundering in US, with the media system here, and how so many stories do not get told. Because, it's the national news outlets only care for it if it's sensational enough, and that's when they come. And so many things get lost in the whole mix. So here, when you think about it, in this case back home, the fact that if you saw that the stories were also in Hindi, a lot of the videos were in Hindi, and because that's something also that is interesting here, that some of the journalists, the language divide, talk about how they even had a hard time with the buttons. So talk about barriers. There are so many barriers. And I actually looked at an OECD report. OECD does a lot of great initiatives on women and marginalized populations and how they're grappling with the issues of technology. And so if you look at some of the, barriers that exist, let me go back and double check though. Was the question about barriers or was the question about strengths that social media brings to the table? I just want to confirm that one more time.
But it was more about basically how digital media, whether it's social media or just having digital resources available like cell phones, how that has helped or hindered or participated in this community-led storytelling, really globally, but in this case particularly.
Great. Absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, the fact that they have such a huge following. If you look at it with social media and digital media, the divide, we talk about this digital divide all the time, but the divide that existed between opportunities to share stories, going back to what Megan was saying about storytelling, it has social media and other kinds of digital media have offered the opportunity to do that in a way that you can just go with your smartphone, like this, the journalists were doing. They were just going to all these people, recording with their smartphone, and then they were broadcasting it. They were publishing it online or showing it on YouTube, because they have a great YouTube channel if you haven't checked it out. So, so definitely the opportunities that come with this, like with the digital media, they have afforded people the opportunity to mobilize attention towards all of these issues that existed, but they did not have the voice to share in the past because of a bunch of like different kinds of obstacles, like resources to be able to do that. Also avenues to share this information. Also, other kinds of online advocacy options. Now with social media, they can do that. Like I even follow their Twitter page now. They have a lot of Twitter followers as well, and it's pretty active. I'm pretty impressed by, because I do this in my class. I ask my students to look at news, sources and their different, how they use the different platforms, and they have a pretty strong following. So which is a great thing, which also shows that, opportunities like this with digital media, it gives people this option of hearing news that is important to their lives. Like it's not covering something that is far flung, like in New Delhi in this case. It's covering something that's happening right in this community, and they're showing it. And that is something that digital media has afforded us. It has given us these channels where we can do it with less cost associated with it, with a smartphone. It has also created other kinds of challenges. And also there's a gap. But in terms of challenges, I don't know if you noticed the particular clip from the film, which shows these, this woman is talking about a politician, and then you see the YouTube comments. And then there's like, oh, these feminists, they change their husband every night or something like that. So that actually is one of the negatives associated with social media presence, because there is data, just Pew data from US, that shows that if you happen to be a marginalized community member, or if you happen to be a woman, in both cases, you're twice as likely to be the victim of harassment online on social media. So it's like, that's another area where you're exposed to these threats. But these women are so bold in this film that they are taking it on their stride. But definitely there are more opportunities to share the story. And there are more people that are listening to your story. And also it's empowering people, because when you hear these, and you're also able to, first of all, feel like you're visible, which was not the case prior to this, and when it was just the mainstream media. And also it gives you an opportunity to hopefully impact policy, but that's a bigger gap, which we can talk about later, because that doesn't always happen. So.
And Megan, what are some of those stories here in Milwaukee? I mean, you're pretty plugged into the community here and to different types of storytelling initiatives. What would you say are some of the more successful or more interesting digital projects that you've seen prop up in the last, let's say, 10 years?
I mean, there's things like Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, I guess, comes to mind, just as being really a one that's trying to cover stories that might not be covered out other places. So looking specifically at inner city neighborhoods, their staff has a lot of folks who really go out and they try to find those sorts of stories. There's also outlets like the Milwaukee Independent. And really, I do think Ex Fabula fits into that area. I mean, we did a deaf storytelling project, and we were able to put some of those videos up online and then share those through a partnership with Wisconsin Life. So if you think about, really the point is, I think there can't be one. There have to be many, many initiatives and all these different local projects. And I think this film is powerful in that it shows that you don't necessarily, I mean, there's a value to diversity within the field. We need institutions like Milwaukee PBS that are doing, this in-depth coverage and have all the equipment. We also need some people on the street with their cameras. And all the way down to even like you see social media becoming its own news channel in a way. It's been fun to see how it develops. I still will say, as powerful as digital is, I also think there's a really important role for just getting people face to face in a room. But digital can be a good complement for that and a great amplifier. So
Yeah, these days, face to face is still a little difficult even for journalists, but we hope we'll get there soon. That would be
absolutely.
great.
And isn't the ideal thing that like when people can see a film like this and then be able to engage in dialogue, like we really do need both.
And so, what are some of these, I guess, common themes within the different projects or initiatives that you've seen? And this could be either of you answering, I guess. What does it take for these initiatives to really, hit a nerve and take off?
I might just say time is one thing. You could, when you look at this film, you look at Mira and you think, wow, look at all the capacity building that's going on. Look at how multiple individuals are contributing their knowledge to this effort. Those things take time. So I get that that's challenging in a world where, people expect a lot of news to be free. So hopefully, we'll see how the field of journalism adapts and how do we manage to find funding for this. This is where I do think public funding is kind of necessary for those sorts of projects, especially since there are so many barriers. We saw in the film, someone without electricity, you don't have a battery pack. So sometimes it comes down to that. And then I would say again, community. Mira was such a leader, continually training others. How do we find those folks and invest in them?
Yeah, and Simona was just telling us about how even things like English literacy are a challenge when when they're sitting there with their smartphones, like, okay, which one is the button, and those are big challenges.
And in our case, that's partly why we've done programming in ASL and we've done bilingual programming in Spanish. Maybe even flipping the script about who is in charge of whose responsibility is it to speak in what language. We say, well, let's use interpretation and let people speak in the language they're comfortable in. But that does require resources. So
Yeah.
It does. Go ahead, Simona. Go ahead.
No, yeah, absolutely. And also because actually that's one of the big challenges in terms of what Megan was also saying with resources, with capacity building. And also when you are building up the capacity against a bunch of like social norms, when those are working against you, like even the husband of, I was like, Mira must have fought, and I have to give it to her husband that eventually he actually did come through, even though he wasn't super, energetic about it, but still. And so it's kind of like that is a big thing because it's like you have to put in that extra effort. You have to really work and be committed to this because it's not just about language barriers. It's also about networking with institutional actors. Like how do you find these people to interview? Like when you start out with that, it's hard to do that because a lot of time these mainstream politicians, like for example, if you saw the one in the movie, this guy is talking about, I don't know if you got the part with the cow worship, but that's a very Hindu thing, like the cow is considered sacred in Hinduism. So, and it's one of the big platforms of the ruling party right now, which is why when you talk about, she's saying prime minister, chief minister, both from the same party. That's because with the current party, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party, their main voter base is the higher, like the upper caste, and so the lower, like the other backward caste and the Dalits and the Muslims, they are not. They're kind of campaigning sort of against them. So even the elections that happened in their state, a lot of those politicians were fielded from the upper caste. and very few politicians were from Dalits and other backward castes. So even how do we go to these politicians and take these interviews? How do we get access to them? The police, the person that was in the police station, is he going to even consider my story? It's interesting that I saw that in the film, because that's one of the things that I read in the reports about Dalits, because every 24 hours, at least 2 Dalits get, are a victim of crime. And but very few of these cases get registered or taken seriously at the police station. So that's also, these people that are the people with power, they are oftentimes from a different caste or have a different social class. So that's the big capacity building thing right there. Mira is determined to go. And also there's the gender piece, because I saw at one place I was cringing, when she went to the police station and asked this guy, and then there are these other male journalists who are telling her, you should be talking to him this way. I was like, that is mansplaining. And it was hard to watch, honestly. So there is that. There is the gender piece, and there is the caste piece, and there is also the social class, So it's a lot of these different things. And speaking English, that's the other thing in India, that we are being a British colony, at one point, we are a very anglicized society. And, if you don't know how to speak English, you're considered automatically, like you'll be considered less important. So there are many different things that capacity building is important here, and also developing connections, and also telling the kind of story that needs to be said. So when Mira is talking to this other journalist and says, you ended up sort of giving this person a platform instead of critiquing them, that's the other big piece that I teach about, that social media does give us more opportunities to tell a story, but it still depends upon how you're telling that story. Because, if the story doesn't give us the multiple points of view, if it doesn't make people put yourself in other people's shoes, especially if you are from a privileged position and you don't understand, then you're creating more harm than good, if you're not saying the right kind of story. So with all the, elements in it. So there are all of these different things that become things that you have to grapple with. But there are many opportunities for sure.
And both of you do similar work to some extent in trying to teach people how to tell their stories, how to get their stories out there. You help them build platforms. What are some of the things that you're teaching people right now about how to tell their stories authentically, how to tell them successfully so they reach their right audiences? What are some of those tools and lessons that you're passing on to other folks?
I can jump in. Sometimes we take the whole process of storytelling and break it into pieces so that we can think about each of the barriers. There's really great research about the human brain and how we react when we hear stories. And so we leverage that to help people make sure they're including things like emotion. When you're telling a personal story, it's really easy to leave that out, but that's actually one of the things that pulls people into your story quite frequently. The other thing is including details that paint pictures in the listener's mind. That's the powerful thing. When you mention details, today I saw like crocuses coming up in the grass. And if you're a person that knows what a crocus is, you're getting that image in your mind. Now, if you don't, you may be filling it in or you may not. Like, we have to remember that nothing is universal and you have to think about your audience. But sometimes, even if we're just getting people to add a little detail and emotion to their story, and they're practicing it with a partner and they're doing some structured feedback, they can walk away hearing from their partner, oh, wow, this part really resonated with me. Sometimes it's just that confidence, that little incremental win and going, oh, my story is compelling, that can help someone become a more effective teller and help them move a little bit out of their comfort zone without kind of going into a panic zone. That's always what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to what Megan was saying. I teach it more from the perspective of how do we do campaign storytelling? How can we be persuasive? Because I teach also persuasion in campaigns. So it's kind of like, first of all, it's absolutely like making somebody care. That's the big piece, because I'm reminded of this. Marquette did this Dreamers Gala a couple of years back, and we had, students from DACA families and, other kinds of people. And the keynote speaker herself was, a DACA student who had graduated. And she said, it's easy to hate people that we don't know. It's easy to hate people that are just these faceless kind of entities. So, or it's easy to even have stereotypes about them. So oftentimes if this is a story about something that we don't know anything about, then first of all, creating commonalities and common ground. Like, for example, in this case, with this situation, I mean, people that are watching it can instantly see connections with marginalized communities here in the US, like, and so that is the first step, I would say, because people otherwise will be like, how does this matter to me? Or they will just kind of write it off or not pay attention. So I tell my students that if you're creating energy around an issue, a social issue, then that's where you have to start. How can I relate to this issue? So knowing the target audience is a big thing, because who is your target audience? How am I going to reach this target audience? Because their capacities are important. So for example, I study political campaigns. So, a few years back, the politicians during the presidential race were trying to use Snapchat. But the people running the Snapchat campaigns had no idea whatsoever what Snapchat was. And so that's an issue. Like if you, first of all, are these people your base? And if they are you targeting them the right way? So that's always an issue, like having the right language. And by this, I mean language of story, so that people can connect to it. Which is why TikTok, people say a lot of things about TikTok, but TikTok is a very effective medium for people that are on TikTok, so because it kind of, in our information that we talk about this, in this information deficit economy, when people have so many things going on, TikTok delivers what you need in a few seconds, and that's about the attention span that sometimes people have. So knowing who your target audience is a big part of it, and also making them care, and also making sure that you're not being like creating the danger of a single story, which is why this woman, when she was talking to this guy and Mira told her that, that's very important, because oftentimes otherwise, if we don't offer those diversity of viewpoints or the different sides of a picture, social media becomes all the more, it becomes like what should I call it, the moment it becomes a tagline, one thing. And it happens to me, like I was chairing academic senate at Marquette University for 2 years, and I did an interview. I used to do quite a lot of interviews. Last year, I did an interview, which was an hour long. And at the end of the interview, what got published was the one critical thing I said, and that creates a completely misperceived version of reality. So I tell students, if you're picking sound bites, make sure that your sound bites are not just creating one angle, like, because with social media, that's what's going to get tweeted. And that's going to create a misperceived version of reality, which is one of the problems with social media and Twitter or, TikTok or whatever it is. So knowing your audience, creating emotions around it, making people care, and also making sure that the story itself is fact-checked, and also offers different viewpoints, or offers a more nuanced perspective, which can be hard to do in, a few words, but doing the best you can is important. So those are some things we talk about.
If I can just add on then, because I agree, like it's so easy to have I'm on the I'm on the program. See, interruption. Sorry about that. We need nuance. We need people to be able to take in complex messages. I think for Exfabula, we like when we have real humans telling 5-minute stories, because just because society is pushing us towards sound bites doesn't mean we have to move that way. There's also really great long form podcasts these days and all sorts of really rich, nuanced storytelling. So my hope is, as much as it's easy to put out there a real succinct message, and that's the easiest thing to tweet and share, that hopefully we can work to make sure that we are all enjoying the messy, nuanced stories we deserve about the messy humans that we are, as evidenced by my daughter bursting into the room.
So we're kind of running out of time, but I did want to make sure that if there's something that you would like people to get out of this movie, or that it made you think of and you wish people heard, understood, or otherwise took note of, what would that be for each of you?
Well, I can say I learn so much whenever I hear stories from people whose life experience, whenever people's life experiences are different from mine, I learn so much. Sometimes it helps me reflect on my own life and my own culture. So seek those out. Seek out a new media source. Seek out documentaries like this because I think it enriches all of us and our lives, and hopefully, ultimately, it helps us find the solutions and the changes and the policy changes that we can see are needed. Because a lot of the problems that happen in this film, there are very many that are happening here as well.
Yeah, that was great, Megan. Absolutely. I would say that I learned so much, and I'm from India, but I've lived abroad for 20 years and I come from a relatively privileged, family. So it's kind of like absolutely putting ourselves outside our comfort zone. It's also like, watching documentaries, you learn so many things. That's one thing I also thought of, but also the power of inspiration, the fact that these women with a smartphone, they could do this, and that gives me hope for society. And that's what I thought of when this woman said, I have studied. She used to go to school, and then she used to come back and take care of her baby when her grandma used to call her. That shows us, let's, if we have privilege, then let's use it, because so many people are working so hard to make a difference in society. And it was a wake-up call for me that I need to do more with my privilege. So it's honestly like, if they can do it, and anybody can do it if they have the resolve. So it's also for everybody that's watching here, or maybe students or whoever, that social media does have a lot of power, and digital media does too. And today we can do a lot with a smartphone if we are smart about it. And there's a lot we can do to create social change and be change makers. Everybody with a phone can be a change maker. Let's just put it that way. If you needed, yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
And if
And if
you're
I can
not
jump in
ready,
with just
oh yeah.
one thing is, no, go ahead. I just want to say, I think we do have a situation where we can, I guess, do this without the persecution that these women face every single day, and that's no small thing. So, I'm a journalist. This is what I do for a living, and I can't say that I'm looking around, over my shoulder every day, wondering whether I'm going to get beat up or killed or anything. Which is not to say it doesn't happen to some people, but if you are a storyteller or a journalist, or you're thinking of being one, this is not a bad country to do it. So, but go ahead, Meg. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to layer. And for people that find it too scary to even turn the camera on yourself, come to X Fabula. We are all storytellers, I promise. We'll find it together.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for everybody that joined us from home or wherever you are. Our guests, Megan McGee and Dr. Sumana Chattopadhyay, are excellent. They are around. They're here local to Milwaukee. So if you can catch hold of them, please do. And they'll probably teach you something about telling your story. And we hope this screening provided a starting point for dialogue, inspired by women change makers and local journalists in our community and abroad. And it's an inspiring film, obviously, to celebrate Women's History Month. It's a good one. And this film, if you want to watch it or recommend it for others to watch it, premieres on Independent Lens and the PBS video app on March 28th at 10 Eastern and 9 Central. So thank you very much. We would like to also invite you to share your feedback and your thoughts by participating in an interactive survey. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us understand how we can improve our Indie Lens pop-up events. Everyone who completes the survey is entered into a raffle for the chance to win a $50 gift card. So go do that. Gas, that's one way you could use it these days. For upcoming events, visit our website on milwaukeepbs.org/events. And we hope to see you on April 13th for our last Indie Lens pop-up featuring the film Try Harder. A special thank you to our national partners, Independent Lens, ITVS, PBS, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, as well as our local partners, MATC and the John Michael Kohler Arts Center. Thank you very much. I'm Mariano Avila for Milwaukee PBS. Thank you to our guests, and thanks at home. Have a good night.